Hello and welcome to John's Author Diary for the week ending February 25th, 2018. I can't believe it's already the end of February. Where is 2018 going? I've had a really busy week. I'm now up to 32,000 words on my first draft of Blind Gambit, and I'm almost at the halfway point of the story. I'm really pleased with how it's going, but I think next week I'm going to have a little change around and actually write out of order, because the way I've been writing this, I've been following my outline, going through each chapter at a time, in the order that they'll appear in the book. Now, this is a story that's set half in the real world, half in a virtual world, and it's told from a first-person perspective, so it's from the viewpoint of the character. And the central piece of speculative technology within this book is this thing I'm calling a B-chip, which is essentially an implant that people can have in their brains when they're blind and they're able to see within a virtual world. So they're able to experience things as sighted people would, but only within the game world. So I think what I need to do is write the chapters within the real world all together and then do the ones within the game world. Because I think what is slowing me down is that I'm flipping between two very different styles of telling a story. In the real world, my main character is completely blind, and because it's told from what he's experiencing, I'm having to really think about expressing things in a non-visual way. So having to flip between those mindsets is actually quite challenging. So next week I'm going to focus on doing one particular storyline and see if that just brings up my speed a little bit, because I want to get this redrafted and sent off to my editor by Easter. In other news, the audiobook for King of the Wasteland went live. Finally, that seems to take a while after I submitted it to come out. So that means the trilogy is now on Audible. So I'm hoping that will lead to more people getting into the audiobook, because I guess if you see that there's only two audiobooks or one audiobook from a series, that might be a barrier for people. Now, I've mentioned before that I write 4 days a week, and I'm now going to start focusing my Thursdays on doing things like, I suppose, what you'd call professional development. So taking courses, learning skills that I need to improve what I do as an author. So this past week I did the first half of a Udemy course on editing. And it wasn't quite what I expected, because it is editing from a perspective of journalism. And so the guy who's doing the course has got a lot of experience with places like The Economist and The Washington Post. And what he did was go through in great detail how he turns a mess of an article into something that sings on a page. Now, even though this isn't directly related to fiction, I think that it will help me think about sentences, think about structure and things like that. And I think anything like that that kind of gives you that extra set of skills is just a great way to make what I'm doing a little bit easier. I finished The Clockwork Universe by Edward Dolnick. I thought it was okay. I gave it 3 stars on Goodreads. This was a book that was about the history of the Royal Society, but although I found a lot of it interesting, there was also a lack of depth that I tend to expect with non-fiction stuff, so that was a shame. I've started reading a book called The Glass Bead Game by Herman Hesse. Now, because of the way I write and the kind of books that I like, I found this really hard to get into. It's quite a deep philosophical book. I have no problem with that. I was listening to the audiobook, and it was an hour and 18 minutes into the audiobook before we were introduced to a character. It spent more than 5% of the book essentially setting up the context and the world. And for me, I'd rather just see the character in the world and work out what's going on. Maybe it's a taste thing, I don't know, but I found it boring. But now we're into the story. It seems like it's going to be interesting, so I'll stick with it. I read a really cool Philip K. Dick story this week called The Exhibit, which was about a man in, I think it was the 23rd century, who got lost in a virtual world, a virtual rendering of the 20th century that was so realistic it gave him new memories and things like that, and he convinced himself that the world that he was in was real, and then he wasn't sure whether the world in the 23rd century was real or the world that he was in now was real. And when he went back to the 23rd century, he convinced himself that it wasn't a virtual representation. He'd actually stumbled upon a time gate. And it's got one of those gut punch endings, which I really love. So, great story. It was in the... I've just bought the Electric Dreams collection, which I think is a spin-off of the series, but it's basically a collection of Philip K. Dick stories, so you can't go far wrong with that. So I've not had any questions this week. You can email me. It's john@johncronshaw.com. You can follow me on Twitter. It's @JLCronshaw. And if you want to start reading any of my work, you can get Addict of the Wasteland for free. Simply go to tinyurl.com/getmyprequel and I'll send you a free copy. So until next time, cheerio.